Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I, Dr. Shubhda Joshi, welcome you in another afternoon academic session. Last time we had a lecture with Amol Lunkar sir, and really it was very informative. Today also, sir came with a very great topic, which is very much useful in our day-to-day practice as a GP practitioner, that is PID. Because most of the time, patients comes with some infection or inflammatory disorders, and if not treated and diagnosed at the right time, the patient may land in the infertility or some major problem. So it's very important to diagnose the case, to refer the case, and to treat the case at the right time. How? Yes, there are so many questions. So related to that, sir will answer, sir will discuss the things like PID. To introduce the sir, we have our senior member from GPA, Dr. Nisha Shah ma'am. She is a BMS and practicing at Hasbapet since last 29 years. She was a past president of Medigen Doctors Association. She was a member of Pune Paid Doctors Association, and she is a board member in Girls High School Rastapet. So now I hand over the charge to Dr. Nisha ma'am. Over to you, Dr. Nisha ma'am.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for your faith in me to introduce Dr. Amol sir. Dr. Amol Lunkar, MD DNB Diploma in Advanced Gynec and Endoscopy, Germany. He is a Chief IVF Specialist in Indira IVF, founder member of Gynec Endocrinos Society of India. Some of his achievements are Indumati Jhaveri Prize for Best Research Paper in India 2010, Suli Rudra Sinha Prize for Best Advanced Gynec Endoscopy Surgery by Federation of Ops and Gynec in 2010, Best Paper Presentation at National Conference at New Delhi in April 2011, author for 28 papers nationally and internationally. He has removed 7 kg ovarian tumor laparoscopically, broadcasted by many TV channels, winner of Hall of Fame IVF Specialist in Western India. He is awarded Most Inspiring Gynecologist of Western India 2018 by Economic Times, Man of the Year 2017-18 by Times of India, Pune's Most Powerful Achievers 2016-17 by Femina Magazine. We are lucky to have such a dynamic experienced speaker with us today to share his experience in clinical practice in PID, pelvic inflammatory disease. Thank you, sir. Over to sir.
So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Nisha Shah, madam, for your kind words. And at the outset, let me again thank GPA for giving me this opportunity to interact with you all. Thank you to Dr. Kolle sir, Dr. Shubhda Joshi madam. And I will be interacting with you today regarding pelvic inflammatory disease, a very common, you can say, presentation. And as family physicians and practitioners, definitely you might be getting so many patients or females having complaints of vaginal discharge or lower abdominal pain and on and off, or you can say features suggestive of cervicitis, endometritis and all. So we'll look into details of all this and the things which we'll discuss or cover in this topic will be the definition of PID, what are the risk factors, what are the etiological factors, the pathophysiology of PID, symptoms, signs and symptoms, diagnostic criteria, and the stages of PID with its management in short, and of course its prevention. So all these things will be discussed. So let us start with the definition. Basically, PID or pelvic inflammatory disease is nothing but it is a bacterial, very rarely it can be viral infection also, and any infection is about loss. So anything which is causing endometritis or salpingitis or adnexitis, all this will come into pelvic inflammatory disease. So you can say vaginitis, vulvitis, vaginitis, and to some extent cervicitis will be in the lower, you can say, genital tract infection, while the upper genital tract infection, that is endometritis, salpingitis, adnexitis, all this will come in pelvic inflammatory diseases. So it is a spectrum of diseases involving the uterus and the fallopian tubes or the adnexa, and it is associated with serious sequelae if it is treated or untreated. In both there can be sequelae, because even though we treat it, but already the infection may cause some fibrosis and some adhesions, which might then cause infertility. If untreated, it might lead to peritonitis, even to you can say septicemia. So it can have serious consequences. Overall, you can say the incidence is 1 to 2% of females per year have PID. So out of 100 females, 1 or 2 females in 1 year will have at least one episode of PID. That is the overall incidence, especially in the sexually active reproductive lifespan of the female. So it is rare before coitarchy, rare after menopause. Mainly you can say 15 to 39 or 15 to 45 years of age, that is the reproductive lifespan, or post-coitarchy, it is more common. Naturally, there are some barriers for infection not to occur. So what are these barriers that we'll see, and what are the risk factors which break this barrier and then predispose to infections, that also we'll see. The barriers to infection are vaginal acidity. So anything which causes the vaginal pH to become alkaline, that will result into infections and will cause initially vaginitis, then cervicitis, and then ultimately leading to endometritis or PID. Cervical mucus. Now, normally the cervical mucus is a mucus plug. It has a gel structure. It prevents any ascending infection. It has lactoferrin in it, which again prevents infection. But if the cervical mucus thinning occurs, if the cervical mucus is aspirated for certain procedure, if the integrity of the cervical mucus is affected because of some, you can say, iatrogenic reasons or surgeries, then again the female becomes prone to infection. Endometrium and fallopian tubes both have cilia, which cause the, you can say, clearance of any infection. They have their own secretions, their own milieu, their own microflora, which prevents any infection. Both endometrium and fallopian tube has lactoferrin and lysosomal enzymes, which again prevents infection. And overall, the lactobacilli content of the lower genital tract and the upper genital tract, the microflora itself prevents or acts as a barrier to infection. Hymen again is a, you can say, barrier to infection. So that is why after coitarchy or after initiation of sexual activity, infections are more common. So the breaks in the barrier are going to be menstruation. Now, while during menstrual flow, the cervical canal gets dilated, the vaginal pH becomes alkaline, raw surface area is there, and the protective epithelium of the endometrium is shed off. So during menstruation, during delivery, or after abortion, these are the times when infections are more common. Any intrauterine manipulation like insertion of IUCD, DNCs, or you can say any uh, procedure wherein intrauterine manipulation is done like IUI, there again there can be breaks in barriers and infection can be passed on. So the risk factors, various risk factors are like menstruating teens, multiple sexual partners, again increases the chances of PID. History of previous PID, so with each subsequent episode of PID, the chances of a subsequent PID goes on increases almost 2 to 3 fold. Previous sexually transmitted diseases, non-use of barrier contraception. So barrier contraception is going to prevent PID. While there is no barrier contraception use, then chances of PID might increase. It is more commonly seen with low socioeconomic status or with, you can say, lower hygiene. Early coitarchy again increases the chances. High frequency of intercourse, use of IUCD, cigarette smoking, substance abuse, all this is going to increase the chances of pelvic inflammatory disease. Douching, so many females have a habit of douching the vagina uh, after during menses or after intercourse. They will douche the vagina with jets of water. That is going to increase the chances of infection, inflammation, and ascending tract infection. So that is to be avoided. So whatever cleaning has to be done has to be externally. Any internal douching is to be avoided. So we have already seen most of these risk factors. The age of coitarchy is important. Frequency of intercourse is going. So multiple sexual partners with more frequent intercourse, the chances of PID is going to increase. And any infection of the vagina or the vulva with various you can say pathogenic agents like gonorrhea or chlamydia or bacterial vaginosis. Again, these lower genital tract infection are going to ascend up in some patients and going to cause uh, upper genital tract infection, that is PID. Any iatrogenic procedures already we discussed, like endometrial biopsies, then IUCD insertion or hysteroscopy or HSG or any curettage is going to definitely give increased chances of PID. So these iatrogenic procedures have to be done aseptically with all aseptical precautions so that no infection is passed on. And as I said, with each subsequent attack of PID, the subsequent chances of PID goes on increasing. So if there is one episode of PID prior, then that female has 12% chances of having a subsequent one. With previous two episodes, almost 1/3 chances of again recurrence. And with 3 episodes, it goes to as high as 75%. And you will see that almost 1/3 to 40% of the male contacts are actually the source of infection. So males are usually the, you can say, the carriers or the source of infection, but they are usually asymptomatic. And there is a ping pong infection. Whenever intercourse will occur, the male will pass on the infection to the female, and female will have symptoms of lower or upper genital tract infection. uh, relation between PID and contraception. So any barrier contraception is going to cause 60% reduction in PID. IUCD insertion, there is a higher risk of PID. With OC pill use, it decreases the risk of PID by causing thickening of the cervical mucus. But many times with OC pill use, what happens is usually the female, some percentage of female might feel that there is no risk of pregnancy now, and they might have, you can say, coital issues and or increased frequency of intercourse, or that might result into increase in PID then. So overall barrier contraception is going to reduce PID. That is what is the take home message with this slide. So usually any female coming to us with PID, we usually advise them to use barrier contraception for 15 days or 4 weeks or so till the infection is completely cleared. Now coming to the etiological agents, what are the various pathogens which are commonly seen? In the lower genital tract infection, usually gonorrhea, chlamydia, bacterosis vaginalis is more common. But if these lower tract infection might ascend up and give rise to endometritis, salpingitis, and PID. Other organisms which are seen: E. coli, Peptostreptococcus, Peptococcus. In you can say chronic cases or in cases of IUCD insertion, actinomyces may be there, mycoplasma may be there, and of course genital tuberculosis is quite common in Indian settings. So these are the variety of organisms which are seen commonly. Usually cervical cultures or endocervical cultures or tubal cultures do not always correlate with the pathogenic organisms. Now, Neisseria gonorrhea, very common cause of PID. Almost 10 to 70% of cases of PID are due to gonorrhea. It is a gram-negative diplococci with an incubation period of 2 to 5 days. And 10 to 17% patients of gonorrhea with lower genital tract infection develop a ascending upper genital tract infection causing PID. So, and the treatment is very easy for gonorrhea. Almost all good antibiotics act against it. We'll see the treatment later on also. Chlamydia trachomatis, again, it is a common lower genital tract pathogen, but ascending infection might lead to PID. And this pathogen, it is a slow growing one. So there is absence of acute inflammatory response. It usually causes mild symptoms, but it causes, you can say, more or less subacute to chronic PID. H. influenza, again, ascending infections are seen. Usually these infections are severe. It also results into pyosulfings. So the tubes get filled with pus and the tubes are damaged permanently, will lead to infertility. And it is a monoetiological disease. There can be polymicrobial infections. Almost 30% of PID are polymicrobial. So multiple, you can say, pathogens might be involved, or it can be a super infection, or it can be due to iatrogenic, or it can be due to early from appendix. So appendicitis might lead to salpingitis and then endometritis. So that can also be seen in certain cases. So polymicrobial infection is common in severe infections, and usually abscess formation or teomasis is common with polymicrobial infection. Actinomyces, again, as I said, it is usually a chronic infection, and long-standing, you can say, IUCD use can in certain cases lead to actinomycosis infection. It is usually an ascending infection, and it basically leads to pelvic mass formation. Mycoplasma is also rare cause of PID, though it is a ubiquitous organism, so its role is controversial, but it is related to certain cases of endometritis and adnexitis. MTB or mycobacterial tuberculosis or genital cocks, again a very common in especially the Indian settings. So almost 5 to 10% patients coming to us with infertility definitely have history of genital tuberculosis. And of course, with HIV infections and other immunocompromised status, the chances of tuberculosis infection also increases. And the genital spread of tuberculosis can be in the form of ascending infection. It can be hematogenous spread. It can be lymphatic spread, or it can be direct spread also, or it can be abdominal cocks followed by genital cocks. So these are the various ways in which genital tuberculosis can occur, or the tubes or the endometrium gets affected with tuberculosis. The pathophysiology, usually it is rare in the premenarche or the precoitarche time. It is also rare in the postmenopausal time. It is rare during pregnancy because in pregnancy the cervical mucus thickening occurs. Also the decidua vera and the you can say the endometrial cavity gets obliterated by fusion of decidua vera and decidua parietalis. It may follow appendicitis in certain patients, as I already said. 85% patients is basically the infection spreading naturally. 15% is usually iatrogenic or due to following some procedures or some intervention. And as I said, it is commonly cervicitis, then endometritis, then salpingitis, oophorytis, and teomasis. And finally, if not treated, even to peritonitis and septicemia. So what all we can see is formation of pyosulfings, hydrosulfings, or teomasis, or pelvic abscesses, or even you can say localized peritonitis, generalized peritonitis, and finally septic thrombophlebitis and septicemia and metastatic abscesses. So the spectrum can vary from mild endometritis to absolutely to septicemia. The symptoms: lower abdominal pain, vaginal discharge, you can say urethritis or lower abdominal pain, and painful, you can say voiding. Menometrorrhagia might be there, fever, nausea, vomiting. These are the symptoms with which patient can present with. And what are the signs which we get? And the most important signs is on per speculum examination, you will see vaginal discharge, white vaginal discharge. There can be presence of fishy odor, or purulent discharge might be there. There can be, the cervix can have erosion and cervicitis. Lower abdominal tenderness will be there. Cervical motion tenderness is one of the important signs, and cervical motion tenderness, when we do per vaginal examination, even touching the cervix or motion of the cervix is going to cause a lot of pain, what is known as chandelier sign. That is, any motion of the cervix is going to cause pain in both the adnexa and the lower abdomen. Bilateral adnexal tenderness on per vaginal examination would be there. Palpable adnexal swelling might be there in presence of teomases and pyosulfings. And fever would, of course, fever, tachycardia, and those features of signs of any infection would also be present. You can say laparoscopy, one of the important sign is the Fitzgerald-Curtis syndrome. That is, you will see the subhepatic space or the subdiaphragmatic space. There would be such Voilin string adhesions, and the gallbladder would be pulled up. This is very peculiar sign of chlamydia or tuberculosis or PID infections. So basically what happens is, after salpingitis and adnexitis, this infection causes perihepatitis, and the purulent exudates then ultimately cause fibrosis of this space, and this adhesion formation occurs. Commonly seen with severe gonorrheal infection or chlamydia or tuberculosis. So there is transperitoneal spread mostly. Rarely it can be hematogenous or lymphatic spread to the hepatic area, causing Fitzgerald-Curtis syndrome. So common sign of severe PID, or you can say sequelae also, because previous severe PID can present at this syndrome. So on laparoscopy, you can see these adhesions. How to diagnose the patients? So diagnosis is complicated because such subset of women with PID, usually most of them have subtle symptoms. Not all will present with frank or severe symptoms. Due to serious potential complications of untreated PID and the endemic prevalence of infection, CDC has come up with minimal and supportive criteria. So what are the minimum criteria for diagnosis? Lower abdominal pain or tenderness, bilateral adnexal tenderness on per vaginal examination, cervical motion tenderness, what I was saying as the chandelier sign, that is severe cervical motion tenderness is seen. Then so these, if present, along with absence of any pregnancy or no other cause of such symptoms, then PID is the diagnosis. So lower abdominal pain with bilateral adnexal tenderness with cervical motion tenderness in absence of any pregnancy or any other cause where you can support other diagnosis, then PID is the diagnosis which to come. So these are the minimum criteria. Supportive criteria would be fever, abdominal means vaginal discharge, positive culture, either vaginal or cervical or endometrial cultures positive, or elevated ESR and elevated CRP can also be the supportive criteria. So these are the additional criteria which we have discussed, that fever, abnormal cervical or vaginal discharge, elevated ESR or CRP, and of course cultures which come out to be positive. How we can diagnose? Usually diagnosis is clinical, and clinical diagnosis usually suffice. You can take help of transvaginal, transabdominal sonography, where you will see irregular endometrium, thickened cervix with Nabothian cyst present. You can see thickened fallopian tubes, presence of fluid in the fallopian tubes, that is hydrosulfings. You can see TO masses on transvaginal sonography. Rarely endometrial biopsies might be required. Usually in infertile patients, we go for biopsies to rule out tuberculosis or any other PIDs. Normally, we do not suggest endometrial biopsy for all. Laparoscopy, again, usually done for some other uh, you can reasons like infertility or TO masses, or where you are suspecting some other pathology. There you can simultaneously come to know that it is most likely PID. So most common, you can say, diagnostic tools which are used, it is more or less a clinical diagnosis, along with, you can say, substantiated with transvaginal, transabdominal sonography. So just to summarize, you have major criteria, minor criteria. If you use one major and one minor, presence of all major criteria, then you get a specificity of 60%. If you use all major with one minor criteria, specificity of almost 80%. One major and two minor criteria, then you get a specificity of almost 90%. Differential diagnosis can be ectopic pregnancy, or torsion of ovarian cyst, or rupture of ovarian cyst, or rupture of a hemorrhagic cyst, or rupture of endometriotic cyst, appendicitis, endometritis, cystitis, pyelonephritis, diverticulitis. All this can be the differential diagnosis for PID. So, of just a short flow chart for your day-to-day clinical practice, how to differentiate PID from other differential diagnosis. So if she is having a history of amenorrhea, or a pregnancy test suggestive of positive pregnancy, then we have to think of pregnancy associated complications like ectopic pregnancy. If there is no amenorrhea, no urine pregnancy test positive, but she has had right lower abdominal pain, and the pain is migrating from the right lower abdomen to the periumbilical area, then you can suspect appendicitis, and you can rule it out by using transabdominal sonography, or even rarely, if required, then a pelvic CT. If there is cervical motion tenderness, then PID is most likely. But if there is no cervical motion tenderness, no adnexal tenderness, no uterine tenderness, then we might think of a pelvic mass, for to rule out ovarian cyst or endometriosis or a degenerated fibroid. UTI or pyelonephritis can be ruled out by a urine routine analysis, and by the peculiar symptoms of dysuria. So this is how you can differentiate them amongst themselves, so that you come to a right diagnosis. What are the stages of PID? It can result from acute salpingitis to acute salpingitis with peritonitis, with formation of TO masses, and then with finally with tubercular salpingitis. So these can be the various stages. Just acute salpingitis, then associated peritonitis, then formation of TO masses, then rupture of these TO masses, and then stage 5 would be tubercular salpingitis, or even peritonitis if it is not tubercular. Most of the cases might be treated and might get cleared. Some of them continue to have subacute infection and then chronic infection, and then result into chronic PID. If PID lasts for more than 6 weeks, then it is going to convert into sequelae of PIDs and resulting into chronic PID with hydrosulfings, pyosulfings, TO masses, and ultimately resulting into, you can say, frozen pelvis. And if family is still not complete, then infertility is definitely going to occur. Signs and symptoms, the symptoms can be, as we already seen, lower abdominal pain or backache. Chronic pain would be there, congestive dysmenorrhea, dyspareunia, painful coitus may start, menses might become heavy, infertility might come in. And as the PID becomes chronic, you will see that the overall, you can say, the uterus and the pelvic organs go on becoming fixed. So the easy mobility of the uterus, mobility of the cervix is all hampered, and it causes fixation of the pelvic organs with tenderness. There might be presence of, you can say, the uterosacral ligaments get inflamed and thickened, and there will be nodularity of the uterosacral ligament which might be felt, and adnexa becomes hard, nodular with masses. For chronic PID, the differential diagnosis can be again chronic ectopic, endometriosis, ovarian tumors, or tubercular masses. Pelvic tuberculosis is again one important common happening in Indian settings, and no discussion of PID would be complete unless we consider genital tuberculosis in it. Again, genital tuberculosis, as we already seen, it can be direct spread, ascending infection, or it can be hematogenous spread, lymphatic spread, or there can be abdominal cocks and then secondarily genital tuberculosis. Fallopian tube is the most common and the predominant site. Endometrium is usually secondary to be affected, and usually you can say less affection of the endometrium. Fallopian tubes are the first to be affected. So tubercular salpingitis is quite common, and the classical tobacco pouch appearance with caseations and caseous material and clubbing of the fimbria is what is seen. So basically, again, tubercular salpingitis, it is a more or less diagnosis similar to PID. What basically classical features we see is caseation and TO masses formation. There can be presence of ascites. The overall, you can say, presence of free fluid starts to appear due to this salpingitis and localized peritonitis. The adnexal masses would be formed, but they won't be marked tenderness in the masses. So tuberculosis, the tenderness is less, while in other bacterial infection, it is more tender, it is more acute. Tuberculosis will present as subacute and chronic, you can say, PID. Infertility would be very common with tuberculosis, and ectopic pregnancy risk increases with all sorts of PID, it increases. With tuberculosis also, it increases by almost 6 to 10 fold. And sequelae would be chronic pain and TO masses and infertility. How we can prevent PID? So primary prevention would be by sexual counseling and safe sexual practices, use of barrier contraception, limiting the number of sexual partners, avoiding contact with high-risk partners, and delay in sexual activity until 16 or 18 years of age. So early coiturky is going to, you can say, increase the chances of PID. Barrier method of contraception is the best way to reduce the chances of PID. Secondary prevention would be by screening for infections in high-risk population, early diagnosis and treatment. Treat it when it is presenting as a lower genital tract infection or UTI, rather than it being going into ascending genital tract infection. Tertiary prevention would be by early intervention and complete treatment. So let us see how we treat it. So the CDC, that is the Center for Disease Control, has given various regimens for treating of PID. There are oral regimens and there are parenteral regimens or IV regimens. Oral regimen most commonly used, we can give a single stat dose of ceftriaxone Along with that, start doxycycline twice a day for 14 days with or without metronidazole. Other CDC regimen, that is the regimen B or the alternative regimen, is instead of using ceftriaxone, we are using cefoxitin with probenecid. So most commonly used is ceftriaxone only. That is the difference between regimen A and regimen B. Rest doxycycline, metronidazole, which will stay. So most commonly used is the oral regimen A, single stat dose of ceftriaxone with 14 days of doxycycline with or without metronidazole. And parenteral regimen, you use cefoxitin or cefotitan, or you can also use ceftriaxone, plus you give IV doxycycline. Again, IV doxycycline is quite painful, less available, and you can use oral doxycycline along instead of IV doxycycline. Only thing is here in parenteral regimen, we are giving injectables for a longer duration, for at least 48 to 72 hours. So we have more or less seen what are the various etiological factors, how it presents, and what can be the symptoms, signs, sequelae, and overall, in short, how to prevent and treat PID. So I think basically we'll discuss more about the practical scenarios. So I've kept the topic very short and not much theoretical because it is more of a practical topic. So let us have more of interaction regarding it. So let us, so back to the chairperson, and let us open the floor for discussion.
What's the role of antibiotic in first trimester with PID?
Pardon?
Case of PID in first trimester, role of antibiotics?
Yes, if it is proper PID, first of all, pregnancy itself is going to prevent any ascending infections, because the cervical mucus thickening occurs and endometrial cavity starts to close down as the pregnancy increases or advances. And but definitely, if there is some evidence of PID and it is first trimester pregnancy, we can use antibiotics which are pregnancy safe antibiotics. So ceftriaxone is safe in pregnancy. We are routinely using ceftriaxone in pregnancy. Doxycycline best to be avoided. Metronidazole again, if required, we can use, but best to be avoided in during the organogenesis time. Better we can use after 12 weeks or 16 weeks. So ceftriaxone can be used. Along with that, we can add on with oral azithromycin, that is safe in pregnancy. So again, it will depend on the symptoms and the type of presentation. You can, most of the time, first trimester of pregnancy, you will see more of lower genital tract infection rather than ascending upper genital tract infection. Lower genital tract infection, usually it is fungal infection, candida, or it will be gonorrhea, or it will be trichoplasma. And these are easily treatable with simple, you can say, medicine. If it is lower genital tract fungal infection, say we have not covered lower genital tract infection in this lecture. We have concentrated on upper genital tract infection. So first trimester pregnancy, usually more common would be lower genital tract infections, which are easier to treat.
Sir, how many percentage there is chronic PID and infertility? How you will relate with that?
You want to ask the percentage?
हा, म्हणजे आमच्याकडे खूप सारे पेशंट क्रॉनिक PID चे येतात. इनफर्टिलिटी हा प्रॉब्लेम असतो, पण इनफर्टिलिटी इन्व्हेस्टिगेट केल्यावर किंवा चेक केल्यावर समजते की क्रॉनिक PID आहे. So preference to treat the PID. तर
So
किती
basically, see, even if in such patients who have had subacute chronic PID, even if we treat PID, the sequelae are going to stay. I mean, what do I want to say about that is sequelae in the sense, is that the once tubercular salpingitis occurs or PID causing salpingitis, so any salpingitis once it occurs, what will happen is the cilia of the fallopian tubes are going to be damaged, and if they are severely damaged, then they are damaged forever. You cannot bring the ciliary motions and the cilia back. So this sequelae will remain, though might be after treatment the infection as such might go off, but the sequelae in the form of fibrosis, burning off of the cilia, fibrosis of the ciliary action, that is going to be there, and that is going to then cause infertility. So many times it causes hydrosalpinx and blockage of the fallopian tubes and infertility, and there of course IVF comes into role. If it is you can say milder infection has cleared off, it has not still affected the tubes completely, and the tubes are patent, then less aggressive treatment options can also be tried.
पण याच्यात IVF चे रिझल्ट किती आहेत?
So basically, if both the tubes are affected, there is hydrosalpinx, pyosalpinx, severe endometritis which has affected the endometrial cavity, and there is syncytia formation and all, then IVF is the only way out. And overall, the results of IVF in such patients is quite good if we basically delink the tubes. If there is presence of any hydrosalpinx, pyosalpinx, we have to delink the tube from the endometrial cavity. So if there is no hydrosalpinx or no pyosalpinx, then delinking won't be required. Then just treating infection for 14 days with doxycycline and going ahead with you can say your IVF cycle is going to suffice. If there is active means presence of hydrosalpinx or any inflammatory fluid which is in direct connection with the endometrial cavity, then what will happen as soon as I transfer the embryos into the endometrial cavity, this inflammatory fluid is just going to, you can say, kill my embryos. So pregnancy results will get hampered drastically. So that is one thing which we need to keep in mind in while treating patients with PID. If we take that factor into account, then overall success rates are good, similar to other factors.
But any specific investigation required before IVF for this chronic PID patient?
So no separate investigation is required. If there are presence of TO masses or any doubt of any hydrosalpinx, pyosalpinx, then laparoscopy might be required, laparohysteroscopy.
Okay. Dr. Nisha, do you have any questions?
What is the best vaccine to be used? Itraconazole, fluconazole, terbinafos, or anything else? Your experience, sir.
So basically, we are going to lower genital tract fungal infection. Basically, what has happened is we have overused cotrimazole. So everybody is writing Candid, Cansoft, Candids, Cansoft. So even patients are taking it by their own before meeting you n number of times. And once you, even if you write it once, patient is going to take it 10 times. And then if on 11th time by her own, she's not getting. So because of overuse, there is resistance to certain extent. So newer antifungals are being used like itraconazole or even other than this azoles. We have now started using silver containing creams or silver nitrate, or and some have shifted back to age old gentian violet. So because of overuse there is some resistance. Overall what we usually do is basically best means one important thing to remember is always treat the couple. If we give only treatment to the wife, what happens is the husband remains carrier and this infections come back to the wife. So you treating in recurrent lower genital tract infection, it is important to treat the couple, both husband and wife. And usually, of course, we use both fluconazole or itraconazole for husband and wife, along with metronidazole or secnidazole, along with doxycycline. So that is how we usually treat.
Role of vaginal pastries, for how many days it is recommended?
Usually 6 days is enough. Again, because of rampant use, there is some resistance there also. So people have started adding clindamycin first. So addition of clindamycin helped to certain extent. Now there is certain cases you will see resistance in that pastries containing combination of, that is candid CL also. Nowadays you can see some resistance is there. So there also newer sorts of other alternative fungal pastries are available which can be used.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you very much, sir. Before we
One thing which we did not discuss is the role of lactobacilli also,
yes.
especially recurrent lower genital tract infection. One important thing is overall microbial flora or the vaginal flora is disturbed. So getting the flora back is going to help, because we saw that the flora itself acts as a barrier for any infection. So there is a role of pre and probiotic, both oral pre-probiotic, and there are some preparations of local vaginal pre-probiotic also. So the role of pre-probiotic is there in both in lower genital and upper genital tract infection, because overall resetting or maintaining of the vaginal or cervical or endometrial flora, that itself is going to prevent recurrent infections.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Excellent lecture. Before we proceed, I request GPA President Dr. Shivaji Kolde to say few words.
गुड आफ्टरनून ऑल. खरं तर सरांनी खूप सोप्या भाषेत PID सारखा सब्जेक्ट समजून सांगितला. ऍक्च्युअली डे टू डे प्रॅक्टिस मध्ये बऱ्याचशा गायनेकॉलॉजिस्ट कडे काही लोक जाण्याच्या आधी जनरल प्रॅक्टिशनर जे असे पेशंट पहिल्यांदा अप्रोच होतात, आणि त्याचा या लेक्चरचा आपल्या प्रॅक्टिस मध्ये खूपच चांगला फायदा होईल असं मला वाटतं. GPA लुंकड सरांचं हे तिसरं सेशन आहे, आणि नवीन नवीन सब्जेक्ट सर GPच्या रिलेटेड असे आपल्यासाठी घेऊन येत आहेत. तर पुढच्या सेशन साठी आपण नक्कीच उत्सुक आहोत. धन्यवाद.
Yes, thank you, sir.
Yes,
Right,
I think
rightly,
Dr. Nisha madam has asked the role of amikacin in PID. Again, upper genital tract infection, amikacin is one good thing you can add, especially if it is not responding to initial treatment or oral treatment. If it is not responding, then definitely in the especially polymicrobial pathogens causing TO masses, there definitely amikacin has a good role.
yes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for really very informative sessions for us as a GP. So primary level ला आम्हाला पेशंटला काय गाईड करायचं, काय डायग्नोज करायचं, याच्यासाठी अत्यंत उपयुक्त लेक्चर आहे. आणि ऍज कोल्हे सर सेड व्हेरी राईटली, वी ऑल डेलिगेट्स आर रिअली वेटिंग फॉर युअर नेक्स्ट लेक्चर. So once again, thank you very much. Thank you, Nisha ma'am, for moderating today's session. Thank you, our scientific chairman, Dr. Mahesh Vaya and Dr. Sanjay Vak, for guiding us to conduct such lectures. Thank you, all delegates. And once again, thanks, Lunkad sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, our technical partner, DigiShield. And thank you, all of you. Have a great day. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Thank you, sir. Bye.
Thank you to all the delegates.
Yes. Thank you.